I can be as good as the best of them and as bad as the worst, so don't test me. You better move over. Now that song is by Shabba Ranks and Deborah Glasgow. Okay? And the name of the song is Don't Test Me. You know, a lot of times you'll meet people, right? And you'll look at them and you say, oh, that person wouldn't hurt a fly. They're innocent. So you might test them. And you might do all sorts of things. Plan things behind their back. Do all sorts of things. But then when you realize who the person is, you realize, wow, that person, I should have asked permission before I mess with that person, because God is watching over that person. And while that person might not ever have to do anything to you, the karma will get you. Their ancestors might even show you a thing or two. That's the reason why you can't just judge a person. I remember meeting this guy from England years ago, and he said to me, who are your people? And I'm like, what do you mean, who are my people? He said, where you come from? He was asking me this question because he was looking for a wife. And honestly, in the United States, we don't look at that the same way. We meet a person, you vibe well with the person, hey, let's date. Hey, let's get married. We look at things differently. We have not been raised that way. So I had no idea where he was coming from. And then when he asked for my father's information, that was another thing. You see, when you have different backgrounds, it's important that you find out more about the individual before you go treading on heavy territory. When I say heavy territory, I think marriage is a heavy thing, especially when you don't really know the other person. Marriage can be complicated with people who are from the same country and who share the same, culture. If it's challenging with that, it can be challenging even more so when you're talking about different cultures, different psychological differences, different origins, different even faiths, Growing up, all I knew is that my grandmother would always be wanting to go to Catholic church. And my sister went to Catholic school, my older sister. I even went to Catholic school at one point, very short period of time. These things make you, think otherwise. I know that my great-grandmother had certain things that she would speak of Hebrew things, talk about the different cultures, and she would read, the Torah. And she had the Bible. There's so many different things going on. I didn't find out until later on that we did have certain things that taught us that we might, the Ethiopian background, where the Ethiopians were Africans who came to certain parts of the country, or parts of the world, and who became Jewish because their masters were Jewish. Now, we can go deep into that, but I don't have the platform nor the time to go into all that. But what I'm saying is, when you don't know where you come from, you need to make sure that you find out more information, because the more you think about it, it's like a complex situation. You can be totally confused about who you actually are when you don't know the basics. I have sat down to write a book on so many different levels at so many different times. But every time I sit down to write, I realize that a lot of the story that I've been living is not the truth. You see, I could sit up here and I could say, this is my mother and this is my father. But more recently, I'm finding out so many things that were not true. So it's important that we get to know more about our own backgrounds before we put it on paper. Because I can't give you a finished product if the research has not been found. You see, most of my life, I thought that my grandmother was my mother. And one of the greatest fears I had was not knowing and figuring out that the person who was most constant in my life might be my father. That is a fearful thing, especially when that person was very abusive, you see. So when we look at our lives and we look at the different cultures, that we all share, it's important that we learn more about who we are. You know, I could have been married a few times, but there's certain things when God is putting you on a spiritual journey, your journey might look differently than the next person. You know, I could say we have had, you know, my grandmother, like I said, when I met her when I was a little girl, she was going to Catholic church, and I follow her going to Catholic church. My aunt has said certain things about Judaism. And of course, you know, when you look at my great-grandmother's pictures, she looks like she's dressed in all white. She used to make her own clothing. She's a beautiful woman. And she also had no shoes on. She was a person walking through Harlem with no shoes on, preaching the gospel to the people in the street. So when you have all of these different pieces of a story, you want to know more. And you want to know the truth before you decide to go putting that on paper, because that's a part of you as well. It's part of your history, part of your lineage. And then if I go to sleep, my dreams might tell me something totally different, you know? So it's important that we do the necessary research. We are all coming from different backgrounds. Growing up in the South Bronx, I'm going to be honest with you, I was the most fearful person. I feared my shadow sometimes because there was just so many things going on. People getting stuck in the elevator, people fighting in the vestibule, and I mean, the big girls, you know. Like I told you before, I wanted to hang out with the big girls, and that one day I ended up, all of my friends in my age bracket couldn't come outside or were nowhere around, so I hung out with the big girls. And I ended up getting a spanking at the end of that night, because I ended up picking up some of their habits, putting my hand on my hip, answering what? My mother didn't let that full word come out of my mouth before I had it. You see, you're not supposed to be hanging out with people who are older than you if they're not responsible. When they're just grown and they're doing all kinds of willy-nilly things that don't serve a great purpose, you find yourself following and copying the wrong people. You find yourself in the wrong company. You know, sometimes you'll hang around a certain group of people, and because they're smoking, to you, it looks like it's the right thing to do. So you go ahead and you start smoking. Next thing you know, they've graduated to doing something else that you should not be doing. And that's the reason why you have to be very clear. Even as adults, we have to be very clear about the company in which we keep. We have to be very careful. You can date a person and think you know so much about them, and you know absolutely nothing. You know, I learned that the hard way. Sometimes there was this guy who was doing a great deal of things in the background. And he began projecting his stories on another person. You see, when a person does not want to be seen for the things that they're doing, they'll project their stuff on another individual. So they'll say, this person is a thief, when they're the ones who've been stealing. But see, even with the people who do that, reality has to come in check during one point in time or another. You see, because they can't keep the same story going forever. The truth has to come out. And when that truth comes out, and they're caught in their own web that they actually spun for someone else, then they have no choice but to face it. And it's a tough swallow when you have to eat crow. You see, that's a tough old bird. You cannot continue telling the same stories and thinking that in a minute or two, or even hours or days, months, years, that it's not going to come back to you, because God is a balancer. And when we look at our lives and we look at even the things that we do, we have to look at ourselves and we have to look at the truth. You see, you have to look at yourself in the mirror each day. And whether you are saying affirmations or you are looking on the brighter side of life, there's still certain things that you have to still come clean with, be clear about. You see, I remember I was teaching in Arizona one year, and I noticed that a lot of my students had gray hair. And I could not understand it. These are babies. They're in middle school, elementary school. What's going on? It was the fear It was what they had to go through. They were living a tough life. They were living the responsibilities that their parents should have been experiencing, but their parents were sharing them with them because they needed the help. See, we don't know what another person is going through. We don't know what another culture goes through until we begin to explore. Anthropology was one of my classes that I actually studied in undergrad that I really enjoyed. I enjoyed it because I said, wow, to be able to learn so much about another culture, to be able to learn so much about another person's language even, to hear their slang and to take it on. You know, I had to take this Chinese class workshop before I left New York, and I had to take a French class and then take an Alvinelli dance class in between. My schedule was so packed one year, but I had so much fun. I enjoy learning. A lot of people can't say that. You have to figure out what becomes great to you, because what becomes great to you, what you like, what you embrace, makes you the person that you want to be. You see, I could say I want to be a stand-up comedian, but I might not think I'm funny. I think my younger sister, we used to play Make Me Laugh, and my younger sister used to win every time. Boy, that girl, she should have gone into being a comedian. But maybe, if that was something that she wanted to do, I guess she would have done it. But I think she would have made so much money doing that. You see, your siblings know more about you than you think. I remember my younger brother used to say, aren't you tired of being a goody-goody? And I used to get annoyed with him because I'd say, man, what are you talking about? He's like, man, I can't even tell you the real deal. I'm like, what is the real deal? He's like, I can't tell you because if I tell you, you're going to be mad at me. And the thing is that you're born with certain things. God instills certain things within you, okay? And no matter what another person might say, people will make up stories about you every day. And half the time they're making up these stories is because they're jealous, envious of you. And you don't even realize it because you think you're just an average person. I'm just an average person. What's the problem? But people see more in you than you see in yourself. Well, there was a big secret going on in the family, and I was in the family, but I didn't even know who the secret was about. You see, every family has their own dynamics. Everything that's going on in your life is not even meant for you to know. Some things yes, some things no. But at the end of the day, it's really what you think. Somebody else's truth is their truth. Your truth is your truth. We have got to break out of this square box that we think we live in. Everybody can't be the same as everyone else. And I'm not trying to be the same as someone else. You shouldn't be trying to be the same as someone else either. You should be happy with who God created you in being. But all of us, we have this thing where we feel like we got to be like this person or like that person. And life would be so boring if that were the case. There was this boy who was afraid of his mother growing up. And his mother would yell and she would rant and rave and he was afraid of her. Now, because of his fear that he had of his mother, later on in years he became abusive towards the women in his life. We have to look at how we're raising our boys. Because if this is how it works, we already know what can happen. You see, we don't want our boys to grow up in fear. Now, there's a certain thing that you say, okay, I want to be able to walk in a room and give my son that look, and he knows that I mean business. Okay, that's fine. Because now he knows that you mean business or whatever. But as they're growing up, that little boy is not going to remain a little boy. So certain standards have to be implemented today, now, so that as he grows up, he knows right from wrong. We have too many things going on in our society, too many wrongdoings that led up to the wrong outcome. Prime example, this little boy is so cute, and he starts doing little things that are not right, but you laugh because he looks cute doing it. Because you authorized it, you co-signed on that behavior, he becomes an adult and he does that very same thing. And now, because he's a grown-up, it looks ugly. Back then, it looked cute. Now it's ugly. We have to begin to fix the problems because our boys are growing up to be men, and we don't want them to come out on the wrong side of law, okay? And you know exactly what I mean when I say that, because these things are happening too often. A family saw this boy doing all these things growing up, and they laughed and they thought it was cute. He became a man and he destroyed his life. Destroyed his life because he thought that he could get away with anything. People knew who his father was, so his father co-signed on certain things. And his father was happy and proud of him because his father was happy to see that he could get away with things that the father couldn't get away with. So we're going to co-sign on being slick now. That same slickness is not going to last forever. Now you have a grown man who's going to serve time for trying to be slick. There's certain signs that we see in our children, even in ourselves. There's certain things that you see, okay? There's certain things you might think you can get away with. Maybe you got away with it as a child, but you're not going to get away with it as an adult, okay? Even our girls. You have a girl who doesn't clean up behind herself, and you're doing all the cleaning up behind her. And she does little things like leaves nasty things out and does not clean up behind herself. If you don't implement that she should clean up behind herself, she's going to end up having a nasty house in the long run. And this is what we're going to have. We're going to have you go into our house and clean up behind she and her children. Is that what you want? We have to look at what goes on in our lives long term. This one short thing, this one little thing that happened that was never taken care of, this one little thing that you never spoke on turns into a bigger thing, okay? Whether it be man, whether it be woman, we have children. Our children are going to have to be taught certain things. Right now, there's a lot of teachers leaving the profession. And they're leaving and they're saying, I don't understand these children. How many generations have we heard this? Your parents didn't like your music, nor did their parents like their music. These things, it's like Songs of Solomon. Nothing new under the sun. Everything we're doing has already been done, just by different people, and sometimes in different ways. The problem is, though, how are we going to fix it? We have to know. Okay, when I was growing up, if you got in trouble with the neighbor, you was going to get in trouble again with your parents. Because once your parents heard what the neighbor said, and you did something with that, something wrong, that neighbor went and told that story, you were going to get it again. Nowadays, these kids don't have that problem. Or is it a problem? They don't have that problem because their parents are saying, don't reprimand my kid, don't talk to my son, don't talk to my daughter. But because nobody's talking, that child is growing up and learning the wrong things. Sometimes I'll carry different things in my backpack and have different activities, and I'll be on the train or the bus, and somebody's kid is acting out of, and I'll say, ma'am, would you like this? Oh, coloring books, please, thank you. And they'll take that activity and they'll have their child working on it. Sometimes it does start with just a small activity. I even had some bubbles I gave to someone. One parent, she just thought I was giving her something. No problem, I just offered it. I was in the laundry room, and I was trying to do my laundry. Her child was running around, and I said, would she like the bubbles? The bubbles occupied the child. She stopped doing all that running around the laundry room. We have to begin to take responsibility back. And we can't just say it's that person's fault. We are all in the same in the same neighborhood, the same vicinity. They say it takes a village. We're part of that village. If we're all a part of the village, how are we going to save our children? We've got to figure out a way in which we are going to save them. That bully didn't begin being a bully for no apparent reason. That bully became a bully because he got away with so much. Somebody didn't speak up on their own behalf. Sometimes children will go home and they'll say, Mom, somebody's bothering me. But sometimes that child is so scared he won't come home and tell a story. He will just live in fear. How many children do you know have gotten beaten up for a lot of their life, and they never came home and told their parents because they felt their parents were going through something already. They didn't want to share that with their parents. We have got to figure out a way in which we are going to turn things around. Right now, the biggest fear now is homelessness. I met a police officer the other day who is having issues with her landlord just not fulfilling her lease. Her lease is up and he's ready for her to leave because he can get much more for that same apartment. We're putting the emphasis on money instead of family. There used to be a time where you were happy to have a police officer who lived in your facility or in your apartment complex because you knew that the crime would be down because of that police officer. There used to be a time where you would give discounts to teachers because you know they don't make that much money. There used to be a time. That time is now. We need to figure out what we're going to do because our country is facing a great deal right now, and it starts with us. We're either going to be a part of the problem or we're going to be a part of the solution. It starts with us. We need to work on our own family dynamics, work with our children so that our children are not going to be a problem to our society, but an asset to our society. We as individuals know of a lot of things that are going on, but we can start with just us. Okay? All right, you say, okay, I have some time on my hands. What am I going to do? Maybe I might sort through some things and give some things to the Goodwill. Let me sort through some of these books. Some of these books, I've read these books, and some of these books I know I'm not going to read again. So let me donate this to the library. You don't need to live in clutter. A lot of us live in clutter because we're holding on to things that we know we're not going to even touch. Now, I'll be honest with you, I love my books. You know, excuse me. I've been working on a few things, and of course I have my own summer reading that I have to work on. And I'm also working on my language. There's so many things that I want to accomplish. We all have our own list, so we need to just work at it as best we can. Maybe this week we'll accomplish this goal, next week a whole different goal. But we have to start with us. We can look at other people. Half of the time when we are looking and talking about other people, judging other people, it's because we are not looking at ourselves. We have enough to work on by ourselves without having to judge another individual. So let us begin with us. Focus on what it is that you'd like to accomplish. Write that list. The summertime is almost here. What is summertime starts on the 21st of June, right? We're almost there. So it's important that we work on our list. A lot of us are working on even self-improvement. That's a daily thing, okay? That's something we got to work on every day. You know, I wrapped my hair today because I needed to put a treatment in, and I did not want to be, putting anything else in it. I need to give it a break. We all have to work on our own projects. My project is for me. Your project is for you. Your children have their own projects. I mean, honestly, if I had a child right now, I think that child would be going to some financing class or workshop. Because our children, we don't want our children to repeat the same spending habits that some of us have. I'm not saying us all. I'm not judging anyone. But I am saying that I know that my parents were people who just spent a lot of money, and sometimes they did not have an exact plan for how they were going to spend their money. And I mean, it's because their own parents didn't have, good spending habits. So why don't we start with ourselves? Start with ourselves, help our children. And even if the neighbor's kid might need to be signed up, maybe that child can sign up with your child. And they can learn it, come home and teach what they learned every day. So we can all learn, Each one teach one. We are a community of people who need to be working towards our goals. And of course, if we can set those goals and follow through, we can be a great success. All right, that's been my word. I know I've rambled on enough, and thank you for joining us today. You have a wonderful day, Indigo Moon.